People are now going to AI to get their answers. What does that mean for clients? This morning there was 17 new apps. There's Burger King and Popeyes, Trainline, Booking.com. So a lot of businesses are experimenting. The click-through rates are tiny from a ChatGPT result. The models are a reflection of the internet, and the internet is a reflection of what people have been talking about. The conversations are happening, and you're not part of it, you're going to miss out. The whole technology that drives the search is essentially built on Google and Bing results. So what happens if that pipeline goes away? My big thing is how are these models going to move away from their reliance on search results?
John Campbell is head of AI and innovation at Roast, with nearly 20 years in search. Right now, his attention is on what comes next: voice, ChatGPT apps, and AI agents. All right, John. Thank you very much for taking the time to do the podcast, and welcome to the GEO Blueprints.
Thanks very much for having me. It's going to be exciting.
The mission of this podcast is to figure out what is the step-by-step to visibility in the age of AI.
Yeah, I think we've all been trying to find out how to do that, but we can look into that a little bit more. Maybe we've got a few theories that are coming from our side a little bit different, and we're thinking a bit further ahead, 3-5 years. What's this going to look like?
Love it. All right, so let's start off by first defining what do you do and why does it matter?
Yeah, so my name's John Campbell. I'm the head of AI and innovation at a company called Roast. So we're a digital marketing agency based here in London, New York, and Cape Town. And my role is really to help two sides. One is understand how search is shifting, so how people are now going to AI to get their answers. What does that mean for clients? And then a little bit more intern is how does AI change an agency, a digital agency? So what's that going to have the impact? And so on that first point, our view is that we started off optimizing for geo in one way, but we're going to see maybe a fundamental shift in the future, which is maybe where GPT apps come in, or if OpenAI decide to reduce their reliance on Google and Bing, which underpins essentially how ChatGPT works. How are they going to do that? Are they going to buy one of them, or are they going to start to build their own index of search results? So that's our long-term thinking. And so I think that's why it matters in this conversation. We hopefully inform a little bit about that.
Love it. Let's get into that in a second about these things that you just mentioned. And first, let's talk about, so you're the head of innovation and AI at Roast, where you've built a GEO offering with 3 measurement products: the AI brand index, consumer preferences, and key phrase level data. Could you please walk us through what each of these tells a brand about their AI visibility?
Yeah, so we've approached this in 3 different areas simply because we work with lots of different businesses. So sometimes we're working with consumer goods, and everybody who knows about, if it's credit scores, one of our clients is Experian, everybody knows about them. So we go from a brand AI index, which is actually looking at thousands and thousands of prompts, so 100,000 prompts, and then trying to get that statistical significance, because obviously they're non-deterministic in their nature. So you ask it one question, ChatGPT will say one thing, ask it the same thing, will say something different. So if you have thousands and thousands of prompts, you can kind of average out the results. So from a brand AI index, it's kind of saying, what percentage of the time am I going to appear? We know that everybody knows about us and our product, but how are we positioning ourselves against the different competitors? So we tend to do that for bigger, more well-known companies. And the middle kind of one is consumer preferences. So that's trying to think about when a model's recommending a product, and it seems everybody in the industry uses the example of men's trainers. So it's the kind of the go-to one where you kind of say, if you're asking, a model to recommend you some trainers, what's the model doing when it's thinking? Is it thinking about, the material, lightweight, cost? So what are those consumer preferences that the model wants to recommend? And then how well does your product stack up against those? So some work that we've done there with a cruise company called Hertogrutin was you're really good on amenities, on your offering, on the price, but then there'll be other areas where maybe you're not as strong, and the models think that's a really important thing when they're deciding who to recommend. So from that, we can work on strategies of saying, well, actually, we need to do more on-page content, we need to do more PR, because the model's perception of your brand is that you're weaker in that consumer preference. Last one, key phrase level or prompt level, that's where we're more creating 200-300 specific prompts, popping them into a tool like Peak, which many people have heard of, and actually looking at the results. So what domains influence the citation, what's your visibility, what's your citation scores, etc. And when we have that, we found we can do more actionable things with the strategy. So that might be, oh, it's this particular third party website which is appearing every single time it's a list article, and we need to improve our position on that. Or it's all of our competitors have content here, we need to build some content on our side of things. So those are the three main things. I think also what we've seen for some of our competitors, it's evolved a little bit more, and shopping is coming into it. And so then it's a case of, on those prompts, how many times do we see the shopping feed appearing in the results? And if we see it often, then it's about how do we create a shopping feed specifically to send to OpenAI and optimize it.
Do you think the shopping is going to be a big part of LLMs?
Yes.
So people are going to search up what are the best men's boxers, and then they're going to get kind of like that Google shopping feed and LLMs, and they can just press. And is there going to be some sort of like agentic mode that they can have their credit card in on file, and then they could just be like, all right, I'm out of boxers, order me for the next 6 months or something?
Yeah, so yes and no. I think the agentic checkout, and most recently in the news this week, they kind of, OpenAI said, we're maybe pulling back a bit on that because we didn't see too many people going, click, I'm going to buy. That might be just, we're too early for that stage. What they spoke about today is having both options. So if you're in the, I'm ready to buy my boxes using agentic checkout, yes, but then they'll give the option to go to the retailer. But yeah, we're looking at this on another client. I think it was like 30-40% of the prompts, we saw the shopping feed appearing. And so if it's that prominent, you're going to have to work on your shopping optimization. So specifically, that's creating a separate feed. So similar to how you have a Google Merchant Center feed, you need a separate feed. The fields are very similar, but what we found there is having FAQs, longer descriptions, and more video and image content is really helping. And I think the reason why that's popular is, and my example I go to here is, I bought a robot vacuum. Absolutely love it. A little vacuum that goes around my house and cleans up. And so in that example, there's just so many different products. And I was thinking, I need to then check so many different Google searches, what's this one versus this one, this one, this one. Whereas in ChatGPT, you just give it the 4 products that you've shortlisted, and then boom, it's done a comparison table. So that's why I think the use case of product searching and shopping is great, especially when you're on that types of products. Whether it comes to high end, clothes or other things where, a bit more of a personal touch is needed, it might not impact those e-commerce businesses as much.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is that there's going to be much more importance into giving more data for each one of your SKUs, essentially, so that if people do go and do like a comparison, it will have enough information to draw from.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're going to start to see live information going in there. Another use case was, we were going skiing recently, and I wanted to buy some new merino wool leggings, and I wanted them this size, and I didn't want to pay more than £70. And you asked, AI search, it came back, and it's like, yeah, this one's under £70. You went through to the website, and it was the XXXL version, which obviously they had a surplus off, and they've just reduced the price. All the other ones were still £90. It's so still annoying. So if OpenAI can crack that and get everybody sending real live data from your e-commerce system, you'll have such a much better experience. That's one of the things that's quite annoying about shopping search, especially when you get down to that level of granular detail. Sometimes what appears in a Google result or in a ChatGPT result at the moment isn't exactly what you want it. But if you can get product feed coming through, it will be live and it'll be correct.
Yeah, that'd be quite interesting to have some sort of API call, and then you kind of connect your Shopify or WordPress store directly with some sort of a ChatGPT app, and then that just syncs automatically. And yeah, but a second ago you mentioned that you want to figure out kind of what's important for the model, and then you say, okay, well, you're good on this and this and this for a brand, but you're lacking on these things. Question is, how do you figure out what does the model find important in the first place?
Yeah, it's a tough one. So the way that we've been doing this is, um, large scale prompt creation, and then sometimes it's asking the models what's going into the thinking, and so sometimes that can give up some poor results, but sometimes it has worked out for us. So um, the example with the cruise company is it gave us the it's looking at the conversations that people are having on the internet, and so that will come from Reddit, it will come from forums, and be like, well, loads of people having conversations about accessibility when it comes to cruises, or the size of the cabins, or another particular category. And so you're essentially asking the model to list all of those out for you, and then score your website accordingly. So it's not an exact science, but it gives you a good kind of direction to go in. And what we've found is that when you give those categories or those consumer preferences to the client, they go, yeah, that's pretty much right. Those are the things that we know that we do really well. These are the things that traditionally we've not done very well, but we didn't think that was really important. And actually, what we found is that there are one or two categories where they've undercooked it in the past. And so then it's a case of, well, why does the model have that perception of you? Well, it's because you never talk about it in your press releases. You don't have a page on your website about this information. So it's more of a longer term kind of strategy. And it has one or two times flagged up some, areas that the client's not really invested in the past, etc. Um, but yeah, those are things that we're looking at on that side of things. But I would say it's not applicable for all businesses. But especially when, B2B, and people are going into really kind of detailed, is it, what's the customer service level? What's the flexibility? What's the data export for facilities with this service? That's where this information is really useful.
It almost feels like AI is good overall for the business because, you know, you get to learn your customers better,
Yeah.
like what is important for them. Okay, if it's a cruise, if the customers are having a conversations online about accessibility, room size, and you haven't really addressed those, you haven't made those prominent on your site and like front and center, like, hey, you just kind of neglected that and you thought that your value proposition lies in something else. And then now all of a sudden you have this um, consultancy come in and say, hey, listen, your customers are actually talking about this and this is important. So it feels like it's almost like a good thing for businesses to embrace that.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection, the models are a reflection of the internet, and the internet is a reflection of what people have been talking about. And we know that the models are using platforms like Reddit and forums, and people don't hold back. People, they say what they want to say on those platforms. And so in the past, at our agency at Rose, we've used social listening to kind of pull that out. And we are using that now where we're using data from tools like Peak and Profound, which shows us, oh, these are the user generated social websites that have an influence. And then what we have internally, we have our own tools that then take those lists and go, well, which subreddits, which YouTube channels, which particular videos are the ones, and what are the topics they're talking about. Mix that with some traditional social listening tools, and you can kind of get that flow of these are the things that people are talking about at this moment in time. Strategy there is we need to talk about those, answer those same questions. We need to produce video content and other content on our website. The one that's really hard, and I think everybody has to be careful with, is Reddit. And that you don't want to just start to storm into Reddit, answering those questions, go into those well-established communities and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm trying to answer these questions. We don't want to hear from that brand. So from that side of things, there's a few different strategies. So one is just use the tools that are available on Reddit Pro, to just look at the conversations, track the key phrases, use Reddit answers, and then go, okay, this is what people are talking about. I need to publish some content on my website that answers those questions. Maybe just hold back, don't start posting on there at the moment.
Yeah, Reddit feels like this very guarded community, like by the community. So it's important. And the question that I have, maybe it's not really applicable to our conversation right now, but kind of if all the brands now realize, all right, Reddit is important, and then they all go there, no one's gonna hold back. Come on, no one's gonna be like, oh yeah, we don't. Of course not. And then it's gonna become less like authentic, or it's gonna become less real, and it's gonna become more. Maybe they'll have bots or whatever, or just like artificial conversations. So
Mhm.
it might lose over time. It's kind of this conversation between like fundamentals versus tactics. Reddit might be a tactic in the short term, and everybody's gonna see like go there and see, okay, well, it works now and YouTube works now, but then in, let's say, 5 years, it's going to change or something. So,
Yeah, SEO people will ruin it for everybody. That's the kind of the joke that we've had in the past. But interestingly, we've seen some, and we've had meetings, and we've seen some presentations from Reddit. And what I was talking about before was just using their tools to listen. That's like their number one strategy they suggest to most brands. They call it, I think it's listen and lurk, or lurk and learn, which is just basically watch the conversations that are happening, take that feedback, build content on your website, but don't engage. And there's like a presentation where they go through it, and there's a pie chart, which is like 95% of brands should have that strategy. But there is some brands where we do want you to engage in the community, and it's going to be specific. So if you look at certain tech companies where there is a specific subreddit for you, like there's an AWS subreddit, there'll be a subreddit for Cloudflare and all these different tools. That's where the community do want the official, people from the community, from the company, to engage and answer those questions. But then it'll be on certain topics and threads. So it'll be like, how do I do this? Why is this not working? Oh, here's Paul from, AWS to answer your question. That's great. But then on other topics where it's, should I be using AWS or GCP? They probably don't want Google and then the team from Snowflake and the team from AWS all coming in and putting those biased comments, because that will start to influence it. So I've read it. I've got a bit of a challenge from a community management point of view, so that we don't ruin it for everybody.
yeah, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there has been increasingly more of these short form videos across, TikTok and Instagram, where people post like, hey mom, how many likes for me to go on a cruise or something, right? And it's like 10,000 likes and a comment from, whatever, BMW or something, right? And then what that create, and then you can, if you click on the comments, you usually see that the brands are actually commenting on those things, and they're like, dreams come true or nothing is impossible. And it's such a, I think, cool and important also um, like direction for brands, is to engage with customers with those like individual videos. Obviously, they won't be able to do like all of them because it's probably going to be more and more, but it humanizes the brands. It makes them more accessible, because I feel like before the age of social media, it was like, all right, there's like the consumer, and then there's like this big brand that is like not accessible anyhow, and then now they're like in your feed, like in your comments, and they're like commenting. So, and most likely for SEO, GEO, it's probably good as well, like that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, so I think we've seen that, like brands trying to work out where they position, and I think they'll start to engage with those moments. And when we sit on internal meetings, we don't do too much of community management ourselves, but we'll say, for example, we'll see that our counterpart agencies that work with our clients, and that will be part of their strategy. I think the other thing that we'll start to see is, as we've mentioned, social is having an impact on the LLMs. So now we're going more to the social teams and briefing them in and saying, we need a video that answers this question on a particular topic. So, for example, with a client like Rightmove in the property space, and they want to talk about mortgages and first-time buyers, traditionally the tactic would have been there to create content on our website, which we'll still do, nice authoritative content explaining, the steps to buying a house or renting a house. But now we're going to say, well, actually, when we look at the data, the LLMs are also referencing YouTube. So we now need a short video, we need a long video to appear in that platform, because that's going to also influence the results. And also with video, we see it just appearing in traditional SEO. So across a lot of our key phrase sets on traditional SEO search, videos appearing 40% of the time in the search results. And the average position is normally on the first page. So you normally see that little video carousel with 3 videos. And so from a SEO perspective, we're like, well, we want to rank number 1. There's also this slot. We want it to be our video. And if that video can appear in the search results, but also influence the LLMs, but also people maybe go to YouTube and search for that, then there's a kind of a 3-way kicker that's all building more traffic in. So I think we'll see brands investing more in educational content, specifically on YouTube, because that's the one that we see influencing models like the Google models like Gemini and AI overviews, etc.
Yep. That's why I see my business grow so
Yeah.
so fast over the past year, because I just got crazy influx of brands just coming to me and being like, "Hey, can you make a video, please? Can you make videos, videos, videos?" And then it was just like they're just buying videos, essentially shorts and longs and educational. And the good thing for me is I was already positioned in that SEO. Like, I
Yeah.
kind of came into it from desperation almost. Like, I couldn't crack YouTube. It was like super hard, right? And I still don't think I've cracked YouTube, but I have one strategy like that works, and that is treating it as a search engine first and foremost. So I like to say that I don't create demand in the first place. I tap into existing demand. So every vertical has, search terms and whatever the topics that are people looking for. And I just do my research essentially on both YouTube and Google and see, okay, what is the conversation? What are people searching for? And then I create those like exact match keywords. Um, and then essentially, yeah, that's and we rank. So we get not crazy, but we get across all of our channels about 500,000 views as of right now. But these are, and the thing is, right? Brands come and they're like, I'm like, okay, this is our price for a video, and they're like, oh yeah, we pay for CPM. This doesn't align. This is too high. I'm like, you do realize that these are not just like any views. These are not like short form views that are coming from toilet content. No, no, these are like targeted views. Like we're getting 10% plus conversion rates on our traffic. Like, and this is tracked on partner stack, so it's like it's high intent. We might be getting only 20, 30, 40, 50 views every 48 hours on our videos on some of them, but the people looking for it is like 80% comes from search, both YouTube and external. So
Yeah.
it comes back to the conversation about like social consensus, like what are others saying about your brand, and that is also influencing. But again, I'm always so worried about like brands are taking advantage of it now, and then we're gonna ruin the internet in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, we'll be in a stage where like everybody has a video like on a one topic, and then it's going to be a case of who's got the first video that went out there that's got all the interactions over time. Or it's interesting with the YouTube stuff where we can do like A/B split testing on your titles and on your thumbnails. So yeah, I think the whole optimization of YouTube videos is going to be increased because of the influence on LLMs. And as you just mentioned, some people just go directly to YouTube and go, that's going to be the best place to find an answer to my question, and search on there. So yeah, hugely important.
So you've been running live experiments on the ChatGPT App Store, tracking which apps get featured and testing what happens when apps are connected versus not, right? So let's talk about that. What are your most interesting findings so far?
So uh, quick explain on what GPT apps are. So essentially, they are the ability for any company to develop an app. They submit it over to the team at OpenAI, and then they'll put it in their directory. The user then will then see the app in the directory, click connect in, and then enable it. So if for example, Rightmove, a client of ours, they built that app in-house. So you go to it and then you say @ Rightmove, and then you can ask it a question. And so it might be, find me 3-bedroom houses in Manchester with a garden, which are 5 minutes away from the train station, Piccadilly. So in that example, the app directly connects to the back end of Rightmove via an MCP, and it pulls it in. So the theory here from OpenAI is that they want to keep you inside of the platform. They don't want you to be going in and out. From a consumer point of view, it means that you're accessing the entirety of the Rightmove, property listings, or if it's Airbnb or if it's Booking.com. Whereas if you just go ask ChatGPT for, find me, a place to go to stay in Barcelona for this weekend, it's just pulling up the top results from Google or from Bing. And so there's a certain like FOMO. I'm not sure how many people know about this. Probably we know about it more because we're working in the industry. So in that example, it's kind of saying GPT apps will actually give you a far better experience. And then you can continue the conversations, and it might be like, okay, what would be with the Barcelona example, give me, 3 restaurants that are nearby. That might not be in the Booking.com app, but GPT can then pull from its search results, or it could pull from another app, etc. So that's the premise. What we're seeing though is that once you connect an app, um, uh, maybe 1 or 2 times out of 10, you could just ask a generic question and not mention the name of the app, or not say that you want the app to open, and the app will open. So there's gonna be kind of this idea of, how do I get discoverability about my apps? And that's a really big, hard thing to do, to tell everybody, "You've got to go to this app store, click this button, and go through here." But if in the future, you're just asking it about flights, and then all of a sudden, the Skyscanner app opens up automatically, you're interacting with Skyscanner. You're not talking to British Airways or EasyJet or any of the platforms. You're having a direct conversation with Skyscanner. And then in those apps, the brand can have links that go through to their website, or maybe in the future, a button to click to agentically check out and to book that flight, etc. So it's 50-50 how big these are going to be in the future. If OpenAI decide to push them more in front of users without having them to engage with them in the first place and connect to them, then there'll be a huge clamoring for, I need my app to be out there. And the tool that we've got essentially is just scraping the app store every single day just to see. And like this morning, there's 17 new apps. There's Burger King and Popeyes. So there's all kind of businesses that are starting to do this. There's more of the comparison websites. There's hotels that are doing this. There's people like Trainline and Booking.com. So a lot of businesses are experimenting. Whether they're getting that huge amount of traffic and engagement at the moment, it's early days.
Right. I'm thinking if that's going to be a thing, like for as a user. So if that's going to be, I go to ChatGPT or I go to Claude and I'm like, all right, I want to order food. Is your really behavior of users going to shift from like Grubhub or, Foodora or, some delivery app to ordering within the app? I think that's quite a dramatic shift.
It is a shift, but it's part of their strategy to have, you stay in the platform. I think we've got to work out what the use cases are. And so the holiday one is an interesting one. So if you think about your holiday, you got flights, you got hotel, you've got transport, then you got things to do, places to see. So the idea is that you could have that one command, which is like, oh, I'm thinking about going on a holiday this weekend to Berlin. And then it could engage all of those different apps, pull all that information back. And the reason this is important is because this then reduces OpenAI's reliability on the search grounding process, going to Google, going to Bing to pull that information back. And potentially that information from Bing and Google is out of date. It might not be right. Or when they go, they can't crawl the page because, it's all JavaScript. So it's going to take two things. It's going to take all the businesses to build an app, and that's not easy. It's not too hard. And then it's going to take OpenAI to change people's understanding of how they can use that platform and say, well, actually, you can stay in platform and engage with these customers. But if you've got those two things, will everybody come over and do it? It's to be seen.
Should businesses be building an app on ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think the ones that have the use case that comes straight into your head, and like, yeah, it's an easy use case to understand, definitely. I think the ones that are going to be a bit harder is like, say if you're an e-commerce brand and you sell one or two products, or you're a B2B brand and you sell a service that isn't like a service that you'd use via the internet, it could be a bit of a hard sell, and like you don't really know that initial use case for an app. But at the moment, the infrastructure to kind of get up and running, as long as you've got APIs to your data or your platform, it's quite quick to get built. In maybe a week, you can get a prototype up and running, and then you can go through the submission process. What brands need to think about is how much of their data do they expose. So if they've got their tinfoil hats on, they're a bit scared about exposing too much data. Do they expose all of their information, or do they only expose some of their information and make the user click and go through to your website? And, the whole shift in the last 2 years is I'm getting less traffic from Google, from these platforms. The click-through rates are tiny from a ChatGPT result. So you're now telling me that I'm going to put all this information so that I don't get the click. So, but then if the conversations are happening and you're not part of it, you're going to miss out.
So I'm sure you've seen those screenshots from Google Search Console on LinkedIn that looks like a kind of like an alligator, where the clicks have dropped, but the impressions are growing. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's been mixed for our clients, but generally the kind of across a lot of our clients, the conversation is, is that our clicks are going down. And so there's greater emphasis on ranking really well where you are. And then people are then naturally are looking to AI and going, right, well, if I'm losing all this traffic from traditional Google search, how can I start to regain some of that traffic from AI, from, these other platforms like Claude and ChatGPT? I think one people they've got to get their head around is that the levels of click-through rates and the level of traffic that are going to come from the AI platforms aren't the same. And that's just because you may be researching about, like microphones or something. Some users might click through on the citations, but some people will go, okay, new tab, search for the brand name that I've just been recommended. And it's going to be really hard for you to attribute those journeys. Cross channel, yeah. And then, but what we are seeing from most of our clients is that traffic is maybe small, but it's a higher quality. And that might be just a psychological thing that the users have felt like they've done a really good job prompting, and then that click that they've got through to is a much higher quality result. Or maybe it's just the fact that actually AI search is better than traditional Google search, where you'd have to click on 10 or 5 different, listings, Google again, then you'd find the correct brand. Whereas in maybe AI search is fundamentally better and it's delivering the right user to the right page at the same
I think
time.
the psychological effect is probably a really big one. If you've prompted it with a voice for 2 minutes and then it gives you like the perfect product, like, George, I've got the perfect product for you, and it's like, this matches all the criteria outlisted. You're like, all right, fuck yeah, this is the one. And then you just click through and you buy it probably. But yeah, the cross-channel attribution, the tracking is, I mean, attribution is not great in the first place
Yeah.
in the digital space.
Yeah. One of the easiest thing that we've done so far is actually, especially on B2B and SaaS, is on the contact form, how did you find out about us? Having one of the options is AI search, or, via Claude or via wherever. And as you said, the psychological thing, because you've done a really good prompt, we actually see a lot of people will go, oh, I will actually type that, rather than, just leaving it as blank. Or normally, it's like, I heard you about an event or found you on LinkedIn. When you have that option, we see it. And we see that from an agency point of view. People are finding about our services where they've gone to Claude and they said, oh, can you shortlist a selection of companies in London that offer SEO and geo services? We appear in those lists, and then, they're very happy to then click that. And then I think if they don't do that, having your sales staff and your sales team asking that question, oh, how did you find out about me? Getting that back into the CRM. And so that builds that story of, traffic and levels might not be huge, but actually the quality is there coming through, and the conversion rates are higher from AI search.
Have your clients seen any drop in like business and sales overall because of the drop of clicks, or has it just been stable and growing?
Um, a real mixed bag. We also have got some clients where they will have offered products or services or tools that you no longer need because AI can do it for you. So it could be that's just a drop off in clicks. So it might be that they'd have a calculator on their website that would work out the costs or the volumes for a heating system, etc. We're now seeing prompts where people are going, well, actually, people aren't prompting, find me a calculator that can calculate
Calculator
HVAC
for me.
rows. Yeah, they just put the numbers straight into the models and ask them the questions there. So then all of a sudden, those tools that used to be, really good at driving conversions on the website, they're no longer being used. So there's that side of things. But overall, I think what you've seen is, clicks have dipped, maybe traffic's dipped through, but the end people that were really valid for that service are still finding out about you and converting.
Yeah, it's like less traffic but higher quality. Higher qualities. So you've been working in SEO for nearly 20 years. That's a long time. Do the
I know, no, I started young.
do the fundamentals still apply when it comes to showing up in LLMs, or has the strategy fundamentally changed?
I think there's some things that we're doing now that we wouldn't have done 20 years ago. So the whole, optimizing content on YouTube, and thinking about social. But the core things are still there, which is, have a website that's accessible and have good, relatable, informative content that answers users' questions. I think there's just been a bit more greater emphasis on some of the technical things. So making sure that, you're not blocking the bots. You've got JavaScript that's not preventing stuff from being found on your website, etc. So yeah, a lot of fundamentals are exactly the same.
Do you place a lot of importance, in your opinion, now onto like PR and socials
Yeah.
for the social consensus?
I think PR, socials, and affiliates. So what we're seeing on a lot of the clients is that maybe 30 to 40% of the domains that are in the citations are from traditional PR targets. So it could be your magazines, it could be your blogs, it could be your listicle websites. And so therefore we're taking that data, giving it to PR teams and saying, it's this domain and it's this journalist's article on the best 5 ways to see the Northern Lights. And they've listed cruises as the fourth one, and they don't mention us. So how can you, as the PR person, get in front of that and say, well, actually, here's the data that says cruises is actually the number one way of being able to see the Northern Lights because we can go higher. We're in the sea. There's no light pollution, and then can you get the name of the brand in there, etc. The affiliate side of things is interesting because before we were always thinking about links that Google could follow that would give us, improved rankings, whereas we just want the mention of a brand. So what we have seen for one client where they don't have an affiliate campaign, the journalists, the articles, they won't list us because they don't want to have product number 3, recommended this company, and the link is, no commission, no thing for them. Why would they do that? And so actually the thought is now, how do you then say, well, have an affiliate campaign, or do you offer that person a high percentage rate or some discount code so they can move them higher? And it really depends because, maybe in the insurance space here in the UK with comparison websites, there's a lot of editorial rigor that goes into those lists, and maybe you'll not be able to influence them as much, and it will be literally how good is your product. So if you have the lowest rates, if you have really poor customer service, the journalist isn't going to move you down. Our job so far has been to identify that data, to tell the PR teams about that, and then point them in the right direction.
There's this company, Ahrefs.
Yeah, know them well.
Yeah, and they historically don't have an affiliate program.
Mm.
And what you just said, that I was not incentivized to create content about Ahrefs. But now with this kind of rollout of LLMs and the importance of affiliates, I'm wondering if Ahrefs is gonna, now roll out an affiliate program, sign up to PartnerStack or whatever, and then start to incentivize people to sign up and promote them, or are they gonna stick to their, original idea that they don't want to have affiliates? So I'm just really curious
Yeah,
if that's gonna.
it's hard. I think you can quantify that by looking at, in tools like Profound and Peak. They do a really good job of saying, here's all the citations. So it might be 10,000 domains, and then you can categorize them. And so you could start to categorize them and say, well, actually, it's 60% is you and your competitors. So we're not too reliant on external websites to influence the models, whereas in other times it can be totally different. But yeah, it's an interesting one going forward. That with the whole listicles where, brands are writing articles on their own websites, which are, oh, who's the top X, Y, and Z company for whatever service. They put themselves at the top, loads of information, and then it's like 7 of the competitors, which aren't really their key competitors, or maybe they'll put one of their key competitors and they might put something that's not particularly good for them. So I think Google started to try to downrank those, and if they downrank those, then we won't see them appearing in the LLMs as much.
What I'm very curious about is these tools like, Peak, for example, or Profound, right? They ask you for like a list of prompts that you want to track right in the beginning. Let's say it's 10 prompts. And then they will be basically tracking those prompts for you and seeing your share of voice and how many times you show up for those. But aren't these models probabilistic? Can't they give you like a different answer for every single time you type in the same prompt?
Yeah.
And also, like, there's a memory, so it's gonna be very personalized answers.
Mm.
Why are we? Why are they doing that? Like, I see no value in that.
Yeah, I guess there's two sides of the argument. One is if you just go for scale and you just track thousands of prompts, then you will get some sort of consensus. But the cost of that will be huge, and you'll still never get it. The other thing is, they're building strategies, which is like, oh, put personas in. So the persona could be, let's go back to the example of the robot vacuum. It'd be like one persona could be, oh, I'm a family, so I've got kids. I don't want it to pick up the kids' Lego and stuff like that. Could be I'm a pet owner, etc. So in that example, what they're suggesting is don't just track the prompt. What's the best robot vacuum for £500? It would be, you know, I have two kids, or it would be I have two different dogs at home that have loads of hair that's going everywhere. What's the best robot vacuum? So you can start to do that with personas and scale, etc. But I think what we've got is we've come from a mindset of SEO tracking, which has had some personalization, but it has had less personalization and also less fluctuation. So if you look at an SEO ranking over a period of time, you might go 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3 over like a week period, but you're not going kind of up and down. So I think we need to use these tools slightly differently. The other thing that we do as well is if we're reporting a KPI back to the client, it's not about daily rank or daily visibility. It's monthly or quarterly, because then you're taking a larger average of data as well. The one other thing that we have seen as well is back in February, all our visibility and citation scores took a dip. And when you looked into it, Perplexity made a change to the way that they do citations. Across one of our clients, the average citations was 9 different URLs, and then they went up to 12. So then all of a sudden, our citation percentage just dropped off. We hadn't done anything. The client hadn't implemented anything. The competitor hadn't implemented anything. It's just they made an algorithm up change, and then your scores went up and down. I think we've seen this in the past with a few updates in October on ChatGPT. So we're also going to have to get into the mindset that that number going up and down, yeah, it might be because competitors have done something or you publish content, but it could be an algorithm update that they've made. And then what we see is everybody's scores will dip, or sometimes it will go up and down. So yeah, it's difficult. I do get the whole thing about I'll ask it 10 times in a row. And I did this probably about a year ago. I just sat there, prompting the same thing, going, oh, something different, different. But if you do that a lot of the time, you then will get the consensus. The other thing I think is important is how many competitors are in your set. So if there's 24 brands, and they're all kind of similar, they're all selling a similar product, the model will want to maybe mention 8. So the switch will be quite high. Whereas actually, if you're in a product category where there's only 3 main providers, say, for example, credit scores, and the model always wants to mention 3, the visibility changes aren't going to be too much. So it really depends also on that combination of how many people are applicable for that result, versus, how many the model's willing to show you. And the models tend to want to show you 3, 5 different companies. But again, they could change the algorithm update and they go, well, actually, we're more likely to show 10 companies now in a result.
That's interesting. Yeah, to me, it seems like it's hard to wrap my head around these prompts. And I do not believe that tracking prompts necessarily is going to be the way that this space is going to evolve, because every single person is unique. The way people ask questions is unique. I think it'll be important to understand, okay, how do these models compress big prompts into for it to understand the relationship between the words, narrow it down to the topics. And yesterday I had a conversation, interesting conversation with this lady named Jeannie. She was talking about entities,
Yeah.
and how you want to basically become the topical authority for a specific thing and be sort of the leader, the authority. Because I think, every LLM model wants to win. How does the LLM model win? Well, it wins if over time it gives the users the best possible answers, right? So they get the most value. And they will give the best answers if the companies that they recommend or these sites are going to be the best. So I think the people at these companies like ChatGPT and Google and Claude are actually very wary of us marketers and SEO specialists of like figuring out how they're doing it and like gaming it. So I think it's kind of like this push and pull where they're trying to um, kind of see, okay, are we figuring it out? And then almost like avoid that so they can have not like integrity, but like really not being influenced by somehow. At the end of the day, these are still like computers, so they still like learn. So there's still some sort of a logic involved in how they pull this information from. But yeah, my whole idea, my whole like spiel at this point is that the brands that are gonna win are the ones that are the best for the consumer and for the user. You know, you can gamify it all you want in the short term, and you can do the listicle articles, and you can do this and that, and but at the end of the day, like, does Geico worry about LLM? Nah. Why? Because they're just a behemoth, right? If you think insurance, yeah, you might go to the new company, the new kid on the block, but then at the end of the day, if you want the best quote, if you want the best kind of company that's been around, you go to Geico. If you're yeah, it's just like these kind of entities, like these companies that have been around and that are just have a proven track record. Sure, should they be making sure that their websites are crawlable and that's this and that? Yeah, but at the end of the day, I very much believe in what Jeff Bezos' philosophy is, where it's like obsessing over the customer. Like technology will catch up with your reputation as a service provider and as a product seller, essentially. So that's my whole idea. Should you be, doing this technical optimization? Of course. But I believe that the technology is going to catch up because us marketers, our job is to do this. But the job of a company is not necessarily to, be cited the most in LLMs. Our job is to be providing the best service and product to the customer. This might be a naive take, and some people listening to this might be, oh, well, he's young and naive or whatever. But I take more of this like my role models in life are like, I have an old soul and an old heart. So like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. So I believe very much in the fundamentals and that in the long term, the market is going to be weighing us rather than voting. Like in the short term, yes, we can win the votes, but in the long term, like, do you have the weight that it takes to stay in business?
On a data level, there's an interesting example of that, which is on some prompts, which will be like generic. And we've seen this on Rightmove. Say, for example, the prompt is, find me a 2-bedroom flat in Shoreditch, where we're here today. What is actually happening in the fan out query? So the fan out query is essentially what is the model searching Bing and Google. The fan out query can sometimes say 2-bedroom flats in Shoreditch on the Rightmove website. So even though you as a consumer hasn't said you want the Rightmove website, the model knows Rightmove property, the two things go side by side, and it's putting those brand names into the searches. So that kind of goes to your point there, is that you're building this affinity between property and the entity of the company, and the models are specifically pulling content from your website. So sometimes that's the cite command. So the model says cite rightmove.co.uk. It's internally searching, etc. And so that then comes back to the GPT apps side of things. If they've got an app from one of these companies and you say that's the default, you think insurance, you think Geico, we'll just open the Geico app for you. And that's a really interesting, so how do you come synonymous with a product category to the fact that you do that? And that's what brands will clamber to be the go-to in that property. The one other thing on the prompt side of things, yeah, the prompt creation is really hard because everybody types something different. Whereas in the past, SEO would just be like, we're tracking car insurance, cheap car insurance, etc.
We learned how to speak the computer language, and now the
Yeah,
computer learned how to speak
and
our
just
language.
statistically, the prompts are longer, so there's going to be more variation. What we found really useful is tools like Profound have like a database of It doesn't tell you what the exact prompt. It doesn't tell you the conversation, but it has like a history of prompts, and so you can go in there and you'll see. Oh, actually, I thought people were searching this way, but they're not. And they're just like snippets. There's only like 30 every single month for a particular phrase, but it gives you a flavor of going, oh, okay, people are actually saying X versus Y, or they're putting their prompts like this. And so we've seen like really long ones like, can you find me a 2-bedroom flat, which is in this postcode next to a school that's outstanding in X, Y, and Z? It's not 2-bed flats in this location. So, but then you're like, well, how do I track all of those? And you can't. So a strategy from a prompt tracking point of view is I've just got to pick some, and then I've got to do it vertically, So it's somebody who's very generic, somebody who's very specific. And if you think about travel or anything like that, you've got all the different countries in the world. You just have to pick like one location, go vertically down, and that's your sample prompt set. And then however your visibility is there, you'll assume it's similar on different countries. Um, but yeah, so for like some of our clients in traditional SEO, we're tracking 10, 30, 40, 50,000 searches because the costs are available and you can do it and we can get visibility across everything. Whereas the costs for these tools are a little bit more expensive, but also, as you were saying before, it'll be changing every single time. So you just got to pick a set and go for it.
Yeah. And then we have people who are like, oh my God, this is so bad for the environment. It costs so much energy.
Yeah, and then how many of those impressions on your Google Search Console are just the bots searching to gather results and it's not real stuff? So there's all of these knock-on effects. The question will be, does OpenAI essentially go, right, we're building our own index? We're not going to use Google, we're not going to use Bing. And, already there's been rumors about, well, we know Google were going on a law case against one of the SERP API, I think it was, or maybe it was another company who are scraping the results to to provide for ChatGPT or the platforms. And so there could be something in the future where they go, well, actually, it's a very inefficient way of, and it is actually, it's like we've built this brand new AI search technology and it's all based on 30-year-old search engine technology. Why are we doing that? They're going to build something maybe to get around that, to be less reliant, but then it could become more efficient because at the moment they're scraping on top of a scraper, whereas they could take one of those scrapes out of the equation.
All right, let's talk about AI voice search specifically just for a second now. How is it different from typing a prompt in ChatGPT, and does that difference matter for how brands should be thinking about it? By the way, before you answer that, I am a huge speaker. I don't type into my computers anymore. This is the game changer for me. I ever since I was a kid, I did not, I had the phone where each number had like 4 or 3 letters, and then you had to press, and then you would get to the number, and I fucking hated that. So I was like, I remember thinking as a kid, wouldn't it be great if I could just send voice notes? Because text is very like you can't hear the intonation, you can't hear the tone, which is very important. So I'm a big like voice note sender, and at the same time, I have Whisper Flow, which I think is great. Like I've tested very different ones. I tested the one from Gemini, horrible. I've tested the internal one from Claude, not great, and Whisper Flow just blows it out of the park. So yeah, please tell me about your.
Yeah, voice is really important. So simply because I've worked at Rose for 10 years, but in the middle of it, we had a period where we launched an agency specifically for voice technology, Rabbit and Pork. It's still kind of going, and we were building Alexa skills and Google Actions, and we still to this day have hundreds of Alexa devices in hotels, which are as part of Alexa smart properties. And what you mentioned is essentially voice is 3 to 5 times quicker than typing. So the modality is really good. And also from an accessibility point of view, you don't have to pick something up. You can be doing something else. You could be walking. If you're really clever, you could be typing or watching a video and doing it at the same time. So as an input method, it's great. And we saw that's why Alexa devices and Google devices was brilliant. So it goes again, how do those prompts are huge. But I think what will be interesting is that because it's easier to ask a question, like you were saying, people's requests are going to become so much more detailed. And then if it's so much more detailed, how do you track that? But then it should mean that if you've got very generic information on your website, it's not going to match to it. And so then those niche products are going to get more visibility, um, because, people are willing to spend more time prompting to get more details. Um, that's on the kind of the information retrieval. The other side of it is, putting together a prompt for, building a tool. We're big users of Cursor and Claude Code, and then the rest of the team in the company have access to Bolt, so they can build these tools. And in those examples, your prompts are really long. So a quick, voice request into one model, as we were saying before, which then makes a nice request for that tool, is great. Or if you're planning a meeting, I think that's, these are the agenda notes that I want to go through, or if you're doing an email. So voice is going to be huge. Voice as an output isn't great because it takes you longer to listen to something than it does to read. So that's why I think it's working well, because in Alexa's example, it was voice input and then you had to listen, you had to wait, and you couldn't do anything else. Whereas in what we see now with Claude, you voice input, you leave it, put your phone away, bink, it comes back with a response if it's an agent or a deep learning request, and then you can read it in your own time afterwards, etc. So it's key.
That's why I send voice notes to all my team, but they're not allowed to do that. They should send me text message. All right, 2 more questions before we round up.
Yeah.
First off, hot take, ads and AI.
My hot take is it's going to be applicable for some businesses who are targeting consumers that don't pay for the subscriptions.
Okay, so free users.
So the free users, whereas some of our B2B clients are like, well, why would we be doing ads? Because we're targeting, C-suite, middle management at tech companies. They ain't going to have the free version, etc. So I think it's going to be very dependent on your business. My other side of that is we're going to come from a mindset of, I get, keyword level, click-through rates, conversion rates. I get what was searched for. We're not going to get that level of data. And so I think it's going to be more of a kind of almost a display, kind of push notification kind of, we're going to send this message out. It appeared in front of this many people in the audience, but we don't know exactly what happened. The other one is, I love the ads from Anthropic about, the mum and oh, are you interested in cougar dating? So will there be a natural backlash from, well, hang on a minute, AI is a bit more personal. I'm putting some more information in that. I don't like the ads thing. Ironically, it might push more people to pay for subscriptions, but it's an interesting one.
Or they might go to a different model that doesn't do it in the first place.
Yeah, like the other one, and that's their differentiator, like how kind of Apple's, pushing towards security and etc. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the conversation that I also had. And to me, ads and AI, if I was a free user, I'm not, but if I was, would feel so intrusive, because I share a lot of personal stuff with it. So I was like, I don't want those Anthropic situations happening in my life.
Yeah. The other way they could do it is on the product side of things. So when the product feed is coming through, is one of those slots a promoted slot? And that feels less addy because they all look the same. But again, will that,
But it needs to be transparent though.
Yeah, so you'd have to have a label on it. And then at that point, do the user just go, well, I'm always going to ignore the first one?
Yeah, kind of like savvy people did it with the Google search, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I never clicked on the ads in Google. I don't know if you did.
It depends. If it's a competitor, I'll click on it. That's
to click on the budget.
That's £10 gone. Yeah.
All right. Last question before we round up. What is your go-to LLM model?
So it's really strange. We're just in the process of moving to Claude at this moment. So from a business point of view, we went for the enterprise business subscription. So the business subscription on ChatGPT, just because we could get it safely into the hands of lots of different people at work. But now, yeah, we're moving over to Claude.
And why is that?
Just because I think we've got a bit more flexibility on it, connecting to other tools and other MCPs that we were running to connect to Google Ads, etc. Also, the quality seems to be a little bit better for certain situations.
That is a consensus I hear across a lot of people that I'm talking to.
But there's also a practical part of this is that, I can't end up, from a business point of view, we can't have a subscription for each of the models. So we have to kind of pick a lane and go for it. and we don't want to be moving models over time because you've got your GPTs or your connections or your previous chats in your projects, etc. So that will be quite interesting to see if the models make it easy to switch from one platform provider to another one, etc. Um, so there's that, and then we also then kind of use other specific tools for use cases. So Notebook LLM, and then we're using it personally. I Cursor. I'm used to be able to program. Did computer science at university, then worked in SEO. Didn't do much programming, and now I'm probably doing more programming. I'm doing the programming. I'm doing the prompting.
You're doing the vibe coding.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really good to create those initial tools to then give to our developers who can build them a bit more sustainable. And so in that example, it's using Cursor, but moving over to Claude as a business now.
So currently ChatGPT has the most market share.
Yes.
Would you bet on OpenAI?
I think what because we're just in the industry, whereas they've got they're synonymous with it now. So what's your auntie and your auntie and your uncle and then your cousins, and what are all the students kind of using? So they've probably got the mass market, and that could be something that we see in the future, is that they have the mass market, but then for people working in business or in particular verticals, they'll move to that model. So yeah, but I think all of them are going to do well. My big thing is like, how are these models going to move away from their reliance on search results, as I've mentioned a few times in this conversation? Because if I was sitting on the board or I was a big investor in that, I'd be like, hang on a minute, your whole technology, great, it's a reasoning model, you've got your APIs you're selling, but your whole technology that drives the search is essentially built on Google and Bing results. So what happens if that pipeline goes away? Oh, well, we can train. Oh, how long do it takes to train? Oh, it takes a lot of money, energy. Our results will be always out of date. We have to have this. So it'll be interesting how they're going to get around that in the future, which is where apps could come into it or building their own index.
Yeah. Curious to see if there's going to be one winner take it all, kind of like a Google with their 90% share of search, or if there's going to be kind of many LLMs for all different types of use cases. What would you say?
I think we'll see many different LLMs for different use cases. It reminds me of 20 years ago when I first started in search. Our ranking reports used to be Alta Vista, Google, Ask Jeeves, and we'd have to report on all those ones. And then over time, Google then went up to like 98% share, and then we ignored the other engines. From us as an agency point of view, it's better if we've got lots of different platforms and the market shares mixed, because that's more work for us to do, more tooling, more analysis, etc. But yeah, I think we'll see a split in that some people will use some models, some people use other models, and also some of it might be down to I don't like ads, and then other people are, I don't mind them. I don't the privacy versus the cost benefit. I'm just going to continue using the free version. And different countries as well. That's the other thing we see. Different countries have different levels for different platforms.
And they'll need to figure out how to make money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because currently all of them are losing money.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to be important. Well, where can our lovely listeners and viewers find you if they would like to connect with you?
Probably LinkedIn, the best place. Have a search for John Campbell Roast. So active on there. Always happy for a message. And yeah, also on the Roast website, we've got some articles. We've got some links to some free tools as well. And then yeah, I'm going to be out and about at a few events over the next year. So heading over to Greece for a conference there, and then Brighton SEO will be normally at those conferences there as well.
Awesome. We're going to leave the link to John's LinkedIn down in the show notes. John, thank you very much for the conversation.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers.